Hello again, this is UML Operator. All right, as requested, this session is around versioning your Sparx EA models. I will assume you're not familiar with versioning practices or platforms for UML models, documents, or code. So we're starting very basic level. We will break this content into three subject areas. 1, versioning UML models in Sparx only. 2, versioning both models and documents, for example, reports, research and development, and other artifacts. And 3, versioning models with code. Software versioning is a systematic way to manage and communicate changes in software documents and/or models over time. There are several versioning approaches, each with its own benefits and use cases. First, we have semantic versioning, or SEMVer, which is a widely adopted versioning scheme that emphasizes the meaning of version numbers. A version number is composed of 3 segments: major, minor, and patch. Next, we have calendar version. In calendar versioning, the version number is based on a specific date, usually the release date. For example, this is a version of the 031624 release, or this version was released on 031624. And then there is sequential versioning, which assigns a simple incremental number to each release or subject, such as version 1, version 2, and so on. Note that there are other versioning approaches, such as marketing names or code names. Each business or shop may apply one or more of these approaches based on the type of artifact or intelligence they are versioning. For example, code may follow SEMVer, semantic versioning, while documents may follow the sequential approach, and models or design artifacts may use the calendar approach or a combination of the 3 mentioned above. In most of the shops that I work with, including my own, we use the semantic version for code and a calendar versioning for UML artifacts. For example, XML files, models, reference data, and patterns. While I prefer the calendar approach for documents, most I work with and in the industry use the sequential approach for documentation. For example, requirement documents, knowledge material, and other documentation. Note that Sparx has 2 fields for version and phase. These are free-form alphanumeric data fields where you can use whichever versioning scheme you desire. But you must be consistent, so think through this process and practices before you start. All right, so let's get started with Sparx only from a versioning perspective. So one of the first things that you learned when you started this channel was how to set preferences. So within preferences, if you go to objects right here, you're able to set what your default version number is. In this case, we're using a major and minor approach to versioning. You could certainly add the patch or build following this, and every element diagram that you create will start with this versioning scheme. So from that point on, when you create a package or a diagram, let's just do a class diagram here, and we have a blank diagram. If we look at properties, it starts with 01 as the diagram. If I bring in an element and look at the properties here, you see it starts with 01. Let's say I'm starting a new project folder and I want everything to start with 1.01.01 or just 1 for a patch or build reference. Now when I bring in an element, and we'll look at the properties by double clicking, you can see it starts out with the versioning convention that you wanted as default. The cool thing in Sparx is that you can choose multiple versioning approaches and scale accordingly. So let's say that we want to use tag values for versioning. So I'm going to use this class element. It's good. Tag values are empty and it's clean. What we want to do is major, we'll create a major tag, we'll create a minor tag, and we'll create I want to call it a build tag. You could call it patch or what have you. And then you could put in here the build, and let's just say the build is 16 and the major is 1 and the minor is, I'm just going to go with 2. All right. So now you have this approach where you could use versioning any way you want, and then you could parse the data for reporting, analytics, and other reasons to help filter via tags. So there's multiple ways to approach versioning with Sparx. But the problem with this is if you use this method, you have to have a reason why you're using this method. Because to come back over here and say it's 1, 2, 16, then you have to come back in here and go, well, it's 1, 2, 16, and then you have to keep them in sync. All right, so we're going to apply. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to create unnecessary overhead. So choose an approach that you want to use. Tag values is a method that I prefer to use for analytic reasons, but as we get more advanced in this and we're using data analytics, we're using machine learning and AI to process and manage our models, that might become more meaningful for you. Otherwise, this approach here is totally up to you. Major, minor, and patch or build. Could have major, minor here, and then over in tags, you don't have major and minor because you're covering it. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these where I just have build reference. Let's say you've got a class here that starts with version 1.1. You have a class here that is version 1.2, and then you're utilizing the phase field. This case, we're utilizing PI2, and in this case, we're using PI1. When you start to get better with Sparx, you're going to be able to do things like use filtering. So you can use filtering here, and you have a lot of things that you can filter by. One of them is version. So we select version, and we're going to say the query string is going to be contains, right? Good enough, right? So we're going to go 1.1. So you can see it highlights items that are in your diagram, your model, that are version 1.1. And then when you want to look at other versions like version 1.2, you can see now that this is highlighted, right? This is grayed out as, okay, this is everything here that's version 1.2. Now imagine you had this huge diagram with dozen or dozens of elements in it. You're able to filter and view and talk about specific versions, and you're able to talk about specific phases. So you have choices here such as phase, where you can come in and say, I want to look at every element that contains PI1. So PI1, program increment 1, you can see that it will find all the elements and highlight them as PI1. I want to look at everything for program increment 2, and you can see that using this combination, it helps very much in managing large enterprise architecture documents, right? So this is why using let me double click and open the dialog field, using Sparx version field and phase field in combination helps you parse your models and your views much easier. But tag views become extremely powerful for other reporting and analytic reasons. So now you're able to talk about models that are a particular major release, a minor release, and then even build within that program increment for managing a specific project or delivery exercise. Next, let's talk about versioning both models and documents for things like reports, research and development, and other artifacts. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our project right here, and we're going to hit function key 8 to bring up the generate documentation. You'll learn this in the reporting series. And we're going to go ahead and accept the output to file default. And we're going to choose model report, and we're simply going to hit generate. And it's generating the report, and then we're going to hit view. Now you'll notice in this report that we have the notion of versioning all throughout it, right? So we have a date, of course, at the top, which may be considered version. We could put underneath here version, phase one, version one, draft one, as I showed you before. But you'll notice that the package has a version 1.2. The phase is 1.0, which is interesting, and you'll see that in a moment. The diagram has a version 1.4, and it has a date and time, which is part of versioning. We go down into the elements. We included the diagram in the report. We have class 1, which has a version, and it has a phase, PI1. And then for class 2, we have a version, and we have a phase. So we have versioning. Major, minor is what was selected for versioning in this case. And you see major and minor being the only versioning type here at this particular point. Now you could call the project, like this is November 26th, but the project's going to release sometime in the first quarter of 2024. You could give this title of this report a marketing or code name, and you could apply different phase approach, like this is phase one of a scaled agile implementation using program increments, but what's the phase terminology that you'd be using? You'd learn to choose that, and then once you choose it, you need to be consistent through the rest of your delivery exercises, at least the program initiative. You don't want to be changing your versioning approaches in the middle or during a major program initiative or even project. Now, before we move on, I'm going to go ahead and close this. What we're going to do is we're going to run another report. So I'm hitting function key 8 to bring up generate documentation dialog. And we're going to choose a custom report called model with tags or model tags. We're going to generate it, step on the previous report, and then we're going to hit view. So we basically are extending this canned Sparx implement to include tag values. So down here you see tag values, where in this particular class, you're saying it's build 13. In class 2, you're using tag values to tell you that this is build 16. So you see a major and minor approach to versioning, which is powerful. You can take advantage of all the other features, but you're also embedding your build or your patch information within those elements that you're delivering. So my recommendation is to use the major minor approach within this field for versioning, major and minor 1.2, and then couple it with tag values to manage your various builds. So whether you're working between a version control platform like Git or some other version control platform, you have the ability to parse and manage your major, minor, and patch and build releases through your versioning scheme. So this is most powerful to me when you get into baselining, which is where I do my versioning. So if we come up here and we create a baseline 0, 1 in this case, because there's no other baseline at this date and time, now I'm able to see, well, if something changes, like the developers are working on this class element, it's still major and minor too, but what they've done during the last iteration is they've moved to build 17. They're able to do that in here. When we come up and run another baseline, Control-Alt-B, which is a form of versioning, so new baseline 0, 2, like this, and we're going to hit OK. Now when we go to look at the differences between these two, we can see that, well, for this class element, this could be an API or program, you can see that build 16 in the baseline moved to build 17 in this next iteration. All right, now that we've gone over that, let's get into how the real world may work for you. All right, so we talked about two different packages that had demo classes in it, and then what we were playing with here within these two elements. All right, so we want to move these packages. This one's at 1.02. This package is at 1.2. Interesting, right? And we're creating a parent package to manage both efforts, both sets of models. And it started out at 0.1. The reason it started out at 0.1 is we said, hey, every time we create a new element or package, we want the default to be 0.1. This is our versioning approach. 0.1 is a major minor pattern. There's no patch or build after that, and that's fine. We're going to do that elsewhere. All right. So what we want to do here is set the package to a version number that makes sense for the effort. Do you take the larger of the two version numbers? 1.2 being here, 1.02 being here. Do you take the larger over it and maybe put this 1.2? That's a decision your shop needs to make. I personally would leave it at 0.1 because this is a new beginning for this parent package, while these may be generalized or older namespaces. I would leave it at 0.1. I would even baseline it at 0.1. So Control-Alt-B for baseline. There are no baselines in here. All right, so I create a new one, and we said 0.01 is where we're going to start this baseline. And we've gone ahead. Now we're baselining both packages. It is done. So I'm going to close it. Did we baseline this package? Let's look. So Control-Alt-B, and it was baseline at 0.1, but it is actually sitting at 1.02. I would create a new baseline here because the decision has been made. We pulled it in at version 1.02. I would baseline it at 1.02. Same thing goes with this one. This one's at 1.2. Has been baselined before when it was import. So it was brought in at 0.2. I would create a baseline that starts with what the package and the diagram is, which is 1.2. All right, let's look at the diagram since we said that. The diagram is 108. Sorry, I had it right here, right in front of me. That's why I like using these notes. 108. What's this? That's the class diagram. What's this diagram? It's at 1.4. All right, we can open up the dialog box. It's a 1.4. All right, yet the package is baseline at 1.2. So this is the way that I'm going to leave it. Why? Because the authors set these versions. They didn't baseline. I should be able to go Control-Alt-B and see growth here. I should see a 1.4, but I'm not. The package is at 1.2. The diagram is at 1.4. When the author of the diagram is done, they may go 1.5, 1.6, and then come up here and change the version of the overall package after some process approval, maybe to 1.6, right? Because this had progressed version-wise, major, minor, a minor version of 6 at the date and time. So when you're baselining at the package level, use the package version number. Don't create more work for yourself. If the package is version 0.1, baseline it at 0.1, right? And if the authors of the package have it 1.6, baseline it at 1.6. So come up, new baseline, 1.6, all right? Now, the authors of the diagrams may do the baseline themselves. It depends on how the shop's governance. Maybe the author of the diagram has to get it approved before it's baselined or versioned. Maybe they're doing versioning in RAS, and that's where they're going to accept whatever the version number is. So it's really up to your shop how you want to do your versioning, but keep it simple and do it where it can most easily be managed. All right. Don't overcomplicate your versioning scheme. Your versions or whatever the author makes changes and they want to change the version, whether it's major, minor, and maybe they want to do, hey, I did a patch 2. Maybe they want to do that. That's up to your shop. And then when you come in and you baseline, Control Alt B, new baseline 1.6.2. Keep your baselines, which is Sparx versioning, version control platform. Git is for code, and we're going to talk about code next. But whatever version control system you're using, and Sparx gives you the ability, if you go to package conversion, you can choose between these version control. These are pretty old. CVS old, subversion less old. Team Foundation Server, use this in some efforts. I love this. This is Microsoft's version control system. But today I use Git. So we'll get into that next. All right, so we have two classes here, and underneath them, there's code. So we're connected to our code repository, and we're looking at the code, and this is fictitious pseudocode for this demonstration, so don't get carried away. So engine sensor code written in C, and our actuator code written in C. So we see versioning scheme within the code that this developer is using. And if we're using Git, we use other forms of versioning, stash, and so on. So we may incorporate that within the header of our code, and then that's brought into whatever IDE that we're using. And here we are at the integrated development environment. We're connected to a Git repo. We can manage our changes. We can baseline and branch and do all the fun stuff that Git provides us through this interface in our IDE. Or if you're using the desktop Git Git application, then you're doing it through there. But that's not what this session's about. We're here talking about Sparx and models versus code. So here we've got some code for these classes. And at function key 12, I can drill down to the code. This is 106.15. So major 1, minor 06, and then it has a build 15, or some refer to this as a patch for this minor release. All right. So that's versioning in the code. So how do you bring these together in sync for versioning in your modeling tool? Now you can let me know in the comments down below what you think, your thoughts, problems, issues, or how you would approach it. I look forward to reading those. So in this particular case, this class element is 106, all right, on the engine sensors. The code is 106 with a build 15 or a patch 15. So you get into a situation where should the class element be 106.15? I'll leave that up to you. Do we go to tags and add a tag in here, whether it's patch or build? I use build, and it was 15, and we just simply put the build or the patch, we manage that through tag values. You can automate either one of them. It's easier when we get to script automation to automate that, the tags. All right, so I'm going to go back to elements. So 106. This and this one was 107. What's the code? F12, we'll drill down to the code repository, 107.02. So you can manage semantic versioning, SEMVer, we talked about in the beginning of the video. You can do your major, your minor, and then you could go dot and then whatever the build or patch is in here. But your code developers are managing that. I mean, when you do a sync with your repository, you do a resync with your code repository, and you then drill down into the code, you're going to see the version, whether it is tagged in there via the version control system the team is using, Git or otherwise, or whether they've put the version number within their code header. You're going to see that. I wouldn't get into the point of having to, well, I got to come up here and I got to change this. I certainly wouldn't make my developers, hey, I need you to come back up to Sparx or whatever the modeling tool is, and I need you to put your version number in there. Heck no, is what I would say as a developer. Don't add any more work to my workload as it is, all right? So you get into a point where you're doing design and you might leave off at 107, you're collaborating with your developer. You get close with major and minor, but not necessarily build and patch. Again, leave that up to your development shop, all right? All right, let's close by talking about model library. So you go to Start, you go over here to Model Library, and for me, it pops up in the upper right. And you can drag and drop this window anywhere you like. I like it in the upper right, so this is where I'm going to put it. So in this case, we have a category, which you can add categories, new category. I'm going to double click on it with a cover page right here. So new category, we add a new topic, add topics, you right click on the category, new topic from templates, rename it, and all sorts of other fun stuff, right? Then within the topic, we shared a resource from the current model, right? So if you click on this and add package from current model, you can choose any packages you want, and that's what we did here. And this will make more sense in the model library when I bring up a separate project. We took a snapshot of the current model at that time, and let's look at it. At that time, it was 1.4. So that'll make more sense when we get to it. And then we renamed it 1.4 because if we come up here and we want to add an image of an active diagram, now it's 162. We're going to add it, and then we're going to hit F2, or you can right click on it, rename 1.6.2, all right? And that'll make more sense in a moment. So now we've got a snapshot of the current model that's in this conversation in the library that's there. We have a link to a website where we have delivery intelligence. I'm not going to go to it, but it's very simple to add URLs and links. You go to resources, add URL, put the name, and then you put the URL there, and it will launch it for you. You can add reports that you did, and there's a report that we did in this video. Simply right click on here, add file system document. It will take you to wherever that repository is. You'll select it, and then when the user selects that and opens it, it's going to open up whatever that report was. And this is the report we created in this video. All right, we're over at another project in Sparx. I think this is a local instance, not connected to a SQL database. And what we want to do is we're going to go to the Start tab. We're going to go to Model Library, and we are going to connect with the demo repository where we have our demo category. We have versioning in Sparx, and we could double click on this. What's this one about? Tells you. Double click on this. What's this topic about? And then there's resources, and here we go. Here's 1.4, here's 1.6.2, and you have the version numbers in the names, not only in the diagrams, but it's telling the user you're looking at resources that are relative to this discussion. Now this is very simple, it's just two class elements that's in here. I can come over here, let me close this, and I can right click on this and I can import to current model. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to go ahead and put it under the root. I'm going to hit OK. And it's now bringing in the models that we did in the previous session, all right, at the version they were when they were shared in the repo, all right? So I'm going to go back to Model Library. You can very quickly get access to those versions. This is 1.4. This is supposed to be 1.6.2. It's bringing in a version that was shared in the library, not 1.6.2. Should you rename the packages 1.4? The answer is, I'm going to leave it up to you. I don't use the model library. I don't really need it, but I'm just showing that if you're doing versioning, it's very helpful to make your system human readable, because humans are the ones that are mostly reading your version and trying to be in sync. Most likely, they're going to go to RAS, Reusable Asset Service. They're going to log into whatever your repository is. They're going to go down to whatever the demo project is. They're going to grab the version that they want of the project artifacts. They get able to look at that, be able to see the artifacts as they were versioned in the reusable asset service. And then from here, they're going to select import, and they're going to bring those package and dependencies, or just the package. They're going to bring those into their project. All right. So let's move on and close. Okay, wow, another long video, over 30 minutes long. We covered a lot today in this session. We talked about versioning in Sparx only. We talked about versioning both models and documents, such as your reports, research and development, other artifacts. And we talked about versioning models with code. Again, keep it simple, all right? Don't create unnecessary overhead. Understand what's necessary for managing your models, your intelligence, your documents, and your code. Keep it productive for each stakeholder, and then keep it manageable. Because when you get to governance and other areas where there's concerns about quality, make sure you're able to keep up with the progress of your work efforts. Some efforts are very simple and some are very long and complex and require a lot more controls and understanding where you are at any particular time based off the version of whatever you're focused on. Thanks very much for watching this. Please leave comments down below again. I know that versioning, especially between developers, architects, and even project stakeholders less technical, can become a holy war. And there could be some people in here that disagree with me completely. I'd like to know what your concerns are, your perspectives, and let's talk about it and maybe even create some sessions about it. All right. So thanks again for watching this. Until we talk again, happy modeling.